you can show up drunk on the job at least 3 times and then you will be reprimanded, right? It's all these insane things that you would not believe. But again, it goes back to power and control and money, that if you can never fire a bad teacher, their money gets, basically taken out of the paychecks into the union coffers in perpetuity.
School choice. It's the topic. Parents, grandparents, sisters, brothers, listen up. You're going to want to hear all of this because there's really some good news. There's still some stuff to learn. But before we get going, please hit the subscribe button. Just click it right there on your screen. It doesn't cost you anything. It just makes sure that you never miss an episode. One thing I'm really proud of on this podcast is we interview people maybe you've never heard of who have some of the most fascinating, interesting, or pithy details to share. So this is one of those. Tommy Schultz at Tommy_USA on X. He is the CEO of the American Federation for Children. This is a new organization that is fighting for school choice. They just had a massive victory in Texas. Florida is a big school choice state. And there are reasons. Now, I know people think that school choice is this nefarious way of getting money to rich families so they can afford to send their kid to private school. That is categorically false. It is categorically false. What we care about is all kids having access to the school that will serve them best. Maybe it is a public school, but maybe it's a private school, a charter school, a pod. Who knows? The parents know. And so parental controls and parental rights in education is so important. Stay tuned. Listen to Tommy Schultz. If he doesn't convince you, I don't know who will. He is next. Stick around. Tommy Schultz, one of my favorite people to talk to about one of my favorite topics. This one is, I feel passionate about, and you feel 10 times that, I know. You had a recent big victory in Texas. Before I roll this really kind of emotional and tear-jerking piece of footage, just kind of give us the overview of what happened in Texas and why it's so momentous. Hey, I want to tell you about my friends at besthotgrill.com. You know, there are a lot of special events coming up soon, and besthotgrill.com recommends the gifts of good grilling and healthy eating. If you have a mom, dad, or grad you want to honor, do it with the gift that will be used, be unforgettable, and truly hot. That would be a Solaire infrared grill from besthotgrill.com. Solaire infrared grills heat up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. And it produces juicy, tasty food that is unmatched by any conventional grill. I'm telling you, I have one. I can vouch for this. Now, maybe you're hitting the road or having a staycation. Solaire has hot and fast portable, built-in, and cart models to help you step up your grilling. All Solaire infrared grills are made in the USA and built to last. Solaire grills deliver the wow that everybody likes to get in a gift or major purchase. Learn more about the amazing Solaire infrared grills at besthotgrill.com. Besthotgrill.com. Just go to besthotgrill.com. Just kind of give us the overview of what happened in Texas and why it's so momentous.
Sure. It's so momentous because this has been a basically 30-year fight to bring school choice to every single family in Texas. It was one of the last big states to hold out from passing a sort of private school choice program that would allow families to either use funds to attend a private school, to customize their education, to use funding for homeschooling. And part of it's because the teachers unions are just so powerful here. The superintendents are so powerful here. It's a massive 1,200 school district state that's very tough to kind of overcome that monopoly. And so finally, this last Saturday, I, along with my 2 little boys and wife, we attended the bill signing with Governor Abbott and the legislative leadership that passed this into law this session finally. And so now all kids in Texas are eligible for school choice. The first year, 100,000 kids are going to get it. We assume that's going to grow massively over time. But this was just a big one. It basically took us from about 37% of kids in America were eligible for school choice. Now it's more than 50%. So a huge milestone for the nation.
I think a lot of states are looking on with envy. I want to show this tape. Misty's going to roll it for us in a second. This is a woman who was part of the fight. And she got up there at the podium and made this statement. Go ahead and roll it, Misty.
I want to say thank you to the lawmakers for fighting for for standing up, for voting, for the parents who showed up countless amount of times, who sat till 12 a.m. during hearings, who were bashed. Oh, I'm about to cry, y'all. We went through a lot. We've been through a lot. And so I say thank you to everybody who showed up today. And thank you, Governor, for pushing this. Thank you.
Clearly emotional. She has been part of this fight for a long time, and she's representing the parental point of view. She got emotional when she said we've been bashed. It seems like a lot of, people were put through the ringer on this. Why was that?
When you think about the power that this monopoly has had over families for 150 years in our education system in America, and you couple that with the money that goes with the power, Texas in particular, we spend about $92 billion on public education here in Texas. And the fact that the folks that have been in control of this system, that orchestrate every school board meeting, every school board election, and every superintendent selection, right, across the 1,200 school districts here in Texas, even just allowing for a $1 billion school choice program to get across the finish line, it was an absolute war. It's been a war for them for 25 years. The disgusting tactics that they will do against regular moms and dads, shutting them down at school board meetings, or what they'll do within the state legislative meetings. It's unbelievable. And I think many parents who have been in this fight in all these different states for so long, they've seen it. And what's really remarkable too is who's hurt the most from this type of K through 12 system, where there is a government-owned, government-operated system across all these different arbitrary school district lines, right? It's lower income families, because wealthy families, those who have the kind of the affluent means to do so, they will move. They'll go to that, quote, better school district, right? But if you're a lower income, working class family, that may not be so easy. And the fact that the powers that have controlled this system, the kind of big schooling unions, right, they're totally fine with that. They're totally fine with whenever they do the teacher strikes, or the long, 2-year teacher strike they did over COVID, right? Think about that. Who is that really hurting the most? It's these lower income working class families. And so, yeah, those moms, they get really emotional when it's finally their time to shine, to be recognized, to be heard by the legislature, to be heard by Governor Abbott. I mean, there's so many times that Governor Abbott did all these campaign style visits to schools all across Texas, practically in every county. And I mean, he's got mothers weeping on his shoulders, right? It's a really emotional moment because they know their kids finally have that proverbial golden ticket to get a better education.
Anyone who's a parent or even a grandparent
Right.
knows what their child means to them and what that child's future means to them. And education is a really emotional part of it. I'll just talk about my experience with my first child, and of course with the second. But when you go through it the first time, you look at schools, you imagine your child in that environment. You imagine your child learning and growing and flourishing under the auspices of a great school. And if that great school is not available to you, if the school, like you mentioned, is in an area where maybe it's unsafe, the teachers really don't care. The teachers are just there pulling a paycheck, where they're being maybe indoctrinated into subjects that you don't want. It's heartbreaking. And for me, watching COVID, it hurt me more because our kids were fine. Like we could handle it. They could have computers. I was thinking about all the kids who didn't have access to the stuff that a lot of kids had because they were stuck in a government school. That is emotional. So I what I hear you saying is the biggest opposition is really these unions, the people whose jobs depend on having a monopoly over education. Am I hearing you correctly?
They're the principal backer. Yes, they're the war chest that they bring to every single political fight, from the school board level up to the state legislative level. For many decades and years, I mean, they've controlled not only federal politics, congressional politics, particularly within the Democratic Party, but state level races. I mean, 20 years ago, before we really expanded all the school choice programs in Florida, for instance, I mean, they would handpick the Democratic candidate in Florida. I mean, they would sometimes get virtual no-name politicians that then suddenly be, with $8 million they're backing them with to be, going toe-to-toe with kind of blue chip candidates. But they've been doing this in particular in Texas. Again, I mean, Florida, they have a county school system. So they have only maybe I think it's 67 counties. And so 67 school districts that have one superintendent and then they have a kind of a staff there. Whereas again, Texas with the 250 plus counties has more than 1,200 school districts. So an individual state legislator in Texas may have half a dozen superintendents, some making $300,000 to $400,000 a year with, 12 different deputies. And then you think of the 1,200 school board races where the unions have just been year over year over year pouring money and getting their favored candidates into the slot. COVID really opened a lot of people's eyes to this problem when they're like, I see a problem. I want to have someone address my grievances. Where do you go? The school board on a Thursday night for 2 hours into midnight, who then they don't even take your complaints reasonably and they tell you to get off the stage, right? This system is starting to change. Parents with these school choice policies that are getting signed into law by governors, that changes everything. It puts parents in charge. So in Texas, here in the future, basically fall of 2026, this program comes online. Every parent that gets access to this will have $11,000 per kid per year that they can control. They can use that money to go to private schooling. They can also customize their education. Homeschoolers get $2,000 per kid per year. So suddenly the big schooling unions that we're talking about, the superintendents associations, the school boards associations, all these groups that are basically taxpayer funded, right? Because they're not generating private revenues from somewhere else.
Right.
Suddenly when they realize parents are in control of their funding, it's game over for their business model of controlling every aspect of our education system. Now parents get to control it.
I know people in Arizona and in Texas who have fought against this school choice. They have been told, or they have been swayed, that school choice helps wealthy kids. It just gives wealthy kids extra money to put them in private schools. And so parents who can already afford private school now get extra money to put their kids through private school. How do you dispel that notion?
Well, it's funny because there's usually people have a horrible misperception about what private schooling in America looks like. I mean, according to the federal statistics alone, 75% of the at least listed tuition rates in this country, 75% of them, it's below, $15,000 a year, and even more so when you're talking about Catholic schools.
Right.
It's like 80+% are below $10,000 per year. But when you actually go into the real actual financials of these schools, and we've talked to thousands of private school leaders, and I'm sure you know many yourself, usually on average in a private school, 40 to 50% of kids are in some form of financial aid.
Yes.
And then especially when these choice programs get going, we see this in every single state from Florida to Louisiana. You have some of these pockets where it's a super low income area, a new private school gets started, and all of those children are low income, would never have been able to even sniff out a private school unless there was some financial aid package. But now that their parents actually control the funding, they can get access to some of the best schools in America. And when you look at some of the new research studies that have come out too, they look at the data and they parse the data for low income students compared to other low income students in public schools. And what you're seeing is just incredible results that, again, parents get empowered. They suddenly feel ownership over their children's education. Whereas if you're thinking about it in the old way we did education, which was what are the 5 digits of your zip code?
Yeah.
That determines your outcome. Who's going to feel empowered, or who's going to feel excited when they go, gosh, I'm looking at elementary school, it's a bottom 5% performing school. I'm looking at the middle school that feeds into bottom 5% performing school, high school bottom. You suddenly, as a parent in one of those areas, you're like, it's hopeless. We're going to be in generational poverty. And so they're the ones that have been begging for these educational options, state funded, to go to the school of their choice. And, it's so funny, Michelle, too, talking about state funded options. All these private educational options, they're available at higher ed, right?
Yeah.
No one really fights against those kind of in-state tuition or scholarships. So it's always about K through 12. Yeah. And that goes to the heart of what we've been talking about. It's the power structure, right? If you let parents have the full control of their education funding, suddenly it's this big war that the big schooling unions just cannot allow.
So there's another sort of misconception about all of this. People say, here in Minnesota, the rallying cry is, let's fully fund education, not defining what that number looks like, just saying let's fully fund it. So let's keep throwing money and more money and more. Yeah, we're not fully funded yet. We need more. So I think there are some people who think that the public schools, because they're so entrenched, they've been around for so long, can do this better than private school, in spite of what the research shows. They just think if we could just raise the taxes more, fully fund public schools, we'll be better at it. Why is that an incorrect assumption, or is it?
It's an incorrect assumption because, again, they'll never give you a number of what does it mean to, quote, fully fund public schools.
That's what I complain. I was like, you keep saying fully fund. What is that number?
Well, and here's where...
Let me just, really quick, let me just say this. You were talking about $92 billion for public education in Texas?
That's right.
Jerry Jones built his stadium, which is considered the key, the pinnacle of NFL stadium, for $2 billion. So he could have, you do the math, and find out what $92 billion will get you. Go ahead.
Well, and when you look at the test score outcomes too of this massive system that is spending essentially $20,000 per kid per year, and when 50% or more of kids aren't even reading at grade level, what are we doing, right? And it's even worse for the lowest income population. That's what's so devastating, which their test scores have fallen off, just the complete bottom falling out since COVID especially.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the funding, right, there's more than enough that's going into the system. But the question is, why isn't it making it to the classroom? Study after study will usually show, especially in the biggest urban school districts, it's like 42% of the funds that get allocated for public education actually make it to the classroom.
42%.
And you look and you say, yeah. And so if you're a teacher in one of these classrooms with 20 kids, $20,000 per kid per year, you're looking around and going, gosh, like, I know my salary, where's this other, $300,000 going in this classroom? And you suddenly see these giant school district buildings with hundreds and hundreds of back office admin staff that's just been growing at a rate exponential we've only had basically a 7 to 8% increase in the number of teachers or the number of students since 25 years ago, but suddenly we have a 75 to 100% increase in admin staff going district by district. So that gets to the heart of this. It's like there's enough money there. Where is it going though? Why is it being misallocated? Where's all these billions and billions of dollars going every single year, despite no academic improvement? That's the heart of this fight. Secondly, I'll add one more note and caveat to that $92 billion number. I saw a lot of commentary over the weekend when this was signed into law. They're like, this $1 billion school choice program, why can't they just increase public education funding by $1 billion? It's like, well, the legislature is probably about to increase it by $8 billion. Is that money going to be spent effectively? We'll see. But also, you mentioned football stadiums, which if you actually look across the state of Texas, this $92 billion that we're spending, there's actually hundreds of billions more in debt exposure, bonds, right, that all the voters have to take out because the unions are browbeating people into this notion that our schools are underfunded. And suddenly there's dozens of high school football stadiums that cost $50 to $100 million here in Texas.
Unreal.
There is plenty of money to go around. There's plenty of options for families to actually raise their hand and go, I'd like to see where this money is going and why it's not making it to the classroom, to our best teachers, right? That's the heart of all this.
I wonder why they're not more transparent and why we're not demanding that transparency. Okay, this is the amount of money this year that's been allocated toward public education. Please give us a line item of where everything's going. Why isn't that a requirement or demanded? I mean, I think if parents saw that, they'd absolutely freak. Just like I think they'd freak if you got your tax bill and said, okay, here's your tax, here's what you're paying in federal taxes, here's what we spent it on. People would riot in the streets.
Oh, and I think teachers in particular, right? Because the average lifespan of a teacher in the classroom is about 3.5 years. Because the only way to make money in this current system that the monopoly has set up is that the way to make money and advance your career is basically to become an administrative professional, you work in the kind of district bureaucracy. And so teachers get so frustrated. They're like, I'd love to teach in the classroom. I care so much about these kids, but I've got a limit of what I can make. And then therefore they usually are out of the system. And so also why they don't want this transparency that you mentioned. Because if parents really saw the numbers and saw how much, you have junior deputy vice presidents of X, Y, or Z, thing that's not at all important to the, classroom learning, and you seeing that person's making $200,000-$300,000 a year. I think a lot of people would be quite angry. So at the end of the day, this is sort of the business model. It's say that our schools are underfunded, say our teachers are underpaid. Parents in the classroom, they're begging them, you got to help us raise money for classroom supplies.
Yes.
But if you actually went to the numbers of how much we're spending per kid per year, and as a parent, you're going, wait, where's my $20,000 going? Why can't I control half of that to send my kid to a great school right down the street, right? That's this whole new power dynamic that we've opened up. Parents have really opened their eyes. Our messaging, our campaigns, they've been really getting people aware of this problem, and it's starting to change.
Well, you say it's starting to change. We know certainly Texas had a big victory. Are there other victories that haven't been as well publicized? What else can you tell us about the momentum behind the school choice movement?
Sure. I mean, just this year alone, Wyoming, Idaho, Tennessee, South Carolina, soon to be a couple other states potentially. They've all made big expansions to either programs that didn't exist or new ones that are now going to be expanded to tens of thousands more kids going into the year. And like I said, last year, basically start of this year, about 37% of kids were eligible for some form of private school choice funded by the state all across this country. Now it's going to be more than 50%. And looming even more excitedly for places that, for any of your listeners that are in California or New York who go, the politics are hopeless, we're never going to be able to get a school choice program. We actually have a piece of federal legislation that President Trump said he would sign into law that if we get it to his desks through the reconciliation package, it opens up school choice in every single state. So the unions are freaking out.
Are you guys trying to make this part of the big, beautiful bill?
Absolutely, because it's a tax code change, and I'll just explain the mechanics.
Okay.
Basically, all across the country, there's a lot of charitable giving to scholarship groups in this country. Current tax law says you get a deduction for that. So depending upon your tax, kind of marginal tax rate, you donate $1, you maybe get 20 cents, 30 cents off your tax bill at the end of the day. This, slight tweak to the legislation, to the law that we'd make with this legislation would allow 100% of that funding to be tax credited. So you basically, if you donate $1, you lose $1 off of your kind of the tax you would have had to pay to the government. So you're essentially redirecting your funding to scholarship groups. And there are thousands of scholarship groups in this country, all in basically in every community in some form or fashion. Suddenly, they all can raise funding to allow kids to go to the school of their choice. 22 states already have this exact mechanism in place at the state level. That's kind of the model that has funded, hundreds of thousands of scholarships for kids in these school choice states where we pass this into law. Now we're going to bring that to the federal level. That can open the doors for 2, 3, 4, 5 million kids overnight to get access to a better education, even in these deep blue states where the politics would just be impossible. The union dynamics in California are so bad. There'd be no way to pass this at the state level. But just through a minor tax code change, suddenly this opens up the doors for a lot of kids.
Yeah. My mom was a public school teacher in California for her entire teaching career. And I do remember this very specific time where she went up to Sacramento, the capital, as part of the California Teachers Association. And she was a kind of a representative member. And when she came back, she looked different. She looked despondent. She looked discouraged. And she said, I just asked for a map of Latin America and Spain. She taught Spanish on my wall. And for some reason, that I can't have. And so she was just, I think, and she saw the interactions between the union leaders and the politicians up there. And her whole countenance changed when she got home. I think it really soured her on the profession. And as she was late in life, she passed away 2 years ago. She was tragic. It was very sad to see this woman who had devoted her life to public education so soured on it. But I think she had seen firsthand, and then, through her grandchildren, what was going on in the California schools. So it is hard to imagine California being able to have school choice. But I would love to see this happen. The teachers unions still remain such a massive organization with so much financial influence over, in particular, the Democrats. I don't know if they have as much influence over any Republicans. I mean, they're, I'm sure, willing to give money to anyone who will side with them. But is that power, is that financial power diminishing to any extent?
There's good news there. So I normally tell people a fact that they are completely unaware of. But when I would ask people, how much do you think the teachers unions brings in every single year? And I'll tell folks, it's like, we usually raise and deploy across our organization fighting for school choice. Last year, we raised and deployed about $34 million. Some people, they'll go, gosh, the unions maybe $300 million. And I'm like, you're off by a little bit. It's about $3 billion that they bring in. Because, Michele, it's also a misnomer to call them the teachers unions, because they will unionize anybody. They organize graduate students in, higher education universities. They'll put nurses into these unions, everybody from the janitor to you name it. So
Really?
because it's all about the dollars and cents for them. Every new person that is a union member, they're contributing, or rather, they're being forced out of their paychecks to pay about $800 to maybe $1,200 per year. So when you multiply that across 3 million employees that they've been able to unionize across the two major unions, it's $3 billion, right? All of a sudden, you get to see, once you understand that fact, you'll then recognize when they're begging for, we need more school counselors, we need more nurses, we need more X, Y, or Z staff. That's why you've seen these non-teaching professional staff grow so tremendously. The union business model is, we just need more people. Any warm body, again, they'll get a PhD student to unionize. All of a sudden, it makes them into this apparatus that, in presidential campaigns, we're spending maybe $3-5 billion. They're bringing this into politics every single year.
Yeah.
So it's been this David and Goliath fight, but we obviously have the winning issue. We have parents on our side. And so that's where all of a sudden, now that parents are in charge, and in places like Florida, probably the most expansive education freedom state in this country, last year they almost decertified the Miami-Dade teachers union because the union levels have dropped so low there. So many teachers are actually leaving the public school system and starting private schools in Florida. You're starting to see these trend lines happen where, as we've been saying from the top end of the show, once parents are in control of the education funding, there's a lot of knock-on effects. And I think you'll start to see further and further union levels drop, because when teachers in the classroom that we mentioned, maybe they're making $75,000, $80,000 a year, they realize, like, gosh, there's all this money in the system. Somehow it's not making it to me. I could maybe go into Florida, or in the future here in Texas, start my own private school, maybe 20, 30 families. I can really educate my own community very close to me, and I can just be making 2x more. It's suddenly, these are the kind of unit economic, opportunities that are going to start growing for teachers, and the unions aren't going to have really anything to give them back, saying, well, pay us more money, and we swear we'll increase the budget next year for education. It won't make it to you, but so they've got a losing kind of proposition, and especially once school choice programs expand, you're going to see, I think, a golden age of education, a golden age of great teachers ahead of us.
That would be incredible. We can all keep dreaming and hoping. You make a very good case. After this Texas victory, as big and as celebratory as it was, and you've got your eyes on this reconciliation for federal changes, where else, though, are there other states right now that are on the cusp of doing something similar to what Texas did and opening school choice to all families?
Absolutely. Barring some states have a constitutional quirk that, really makes it challenging to even create any sort of a school choice program. But you've got states like New Hampshire, Pennsylvania looking to potentially make some expansions. And candidly, most of the red states are off the board because, and especially in the last 3 years, Republican governors, Republican state legislatures, they've all said, wait, we can kind of claim the mantle of being the party of education, the party of parents. We can put parents in control of their child's education funding. We've seen gobs of research that have come out in Ohio, in Florida, showing that the public schools improve the more you expand these school choice programs. And it makes sense because it's competition. It's parents that are saying, maybe your kid is thriving in that public school. They're not going to raise their hand and say, I want to leave and go to a private school. And therefore, the kids that are usually struggling the most, there's actual research on this, struggling the most in public schools, they're the most likely ones to leave and to take that kind of education funding, whether it's a scholarship or an education savings account. And so long term, you're going to see more and more states, I think even blue states, start to go, we need to get our act together because we're losing people to, Tennessee or Texas or to Florida. Pennsylvania is one of those states where Governor Shapiro, a Democrat, he actually could persuade the legislature, especially his Democratic counterparts, to say, let's get this done. We already have a school choice program on the ground, but we really need to expand this because suddenly people are going to start fleeing to all the states down south, knowing that my kids could get either $8,000 to $10,000 per kid per year for their education that I can control. I think you're going to see this kind of interesting thing that you see happen sometimes with income tax, right? It's why you saw the U-Haul kind of statistics from California to Texas and Florida, or even to Arizona right across the border be so dramatic. I think you're going to see some of those shifts in education. And thankfully, again, with this federal piece of legislation potentially getting done in the next month or two, it would come online next year. That opens up the door for a lot of new opportunities state by state by state. So stay tuned for more on that, and demand to your legislature, to your federal legislator, to put this into the big, beautiful bill.
There you go. You can make those calls. It's really easy to do. Just Google it. I was in Florida recently and driving from one part of the state to another, probably a 3-hour drive. And along that drive and between destinations, the amount of housing development in Florida is unbelievable. Like the brand new things going up everywhere, outside of Orlando, outside of Fort Myers. I mean, it was just, the expansion is dramatic because I think that state has become so appealing for the reasons you described. I guess the last thing I would ask you is what's your message to public school teachers who see this as an assault on their profession, who see this as, I mean, really, I think some teachers may not really understand what's at stake for them and or what their choices are. How would you address them?
Yeah, I would say they should really actually read the text of these laws that are getting passed. Actually look at those budgets like you were talking about. Why isn't there any transparency, right? They should be asking, yeah, where is all this money going? Like, and you can sometimes more easily see how much these superintendents are making or the vice presidents or deputy superintendents are making. And you can maybe start to go, like that person has a private driver. And then, we have a taxpayer funded lobbyist. What are they doing? You actually, when a teacher can really crack that open and look beyond just the talking points that the unions or the superintendents are making. And even you see this, we've actually been able to expose a bunch of this, but sometimes when there's those, the school board elections or the bond votes, they're sending out communications, which is illegal, across government channels to tell them, you better vote for this. We're watching how you vote. Our school is underfunded. We really need this new funding. That's why we need this bond. They're able to kind of either operate within the gray zone or actually illegally electioneer, and browbeat poor teachers are going, gosh, I'm worried. I mean, they say the school's underfunded. I actually do feel some of it. I'm not feeling like the money's making it into the classroom. They vote for the bond. The money goes to, a new football stadium or building a new building, backwards incentives in the system. So I think teachers should really demand answers, right, from their leadership, from the union leadership in particular, saying, what have you actually done to improve conditions in my classroom, to improve the student learning, to actually get me better pay, right? All of these things that they should be really asking them. Yeah. Why are they protecting the bad teachers and not letting them get fired? All of these questions they should start asking. And two, in places like Florida, the most likely people that are actually going and building new private schools in that state, thanks to the choice program, are public school teachers. And in particular in rural areas, they've doubled the number of rural schools in rural private schools in Florida, thanks to this choice program, because so many public educators are like, gosh, I was frustrated with that old system, the bureaucracy, the paperwork, the testing regime that they've set up. And now I can actually build a school that meets the needs of so many kids in my community. Hope is on the way. And especially when we pass this new federal opportunity, every teacher in every state, I think, especially with that number I quoted you, 3 million public school teachers, the average lifespan is about 3.5 years. That means you've got 10 million potentially, in terms of a human capital, right? About 10 million teachers on the sidelines, plenty of them who are actually heroes and would love to get back into the classroom. Yeah. Now with this kind of shift of school choice policies, you can actually start to see that a lot of those people coming off the sidelines and getting back into the classroom, starting schools, starting little micro schools, homeschool pods, right? Yeah. All these things are actually possible when parents are in control of funding.
You said, you included a phrase a minute ago that I must follow up on. Why are bad teachers protected? Why are teachers who make some really critical errors in the classroom why are bad teachers protected? I guess I'll just leave it at that. I mean, we all know what a bad teacher looks like.
Well, yeah, for your average kind of common person, it doesn't make sense, right? Why would you want, predators or people who, to Chicago, it had one of the union contracts that they were negotiating within the last year got leaked out. And it's like, you can show up drunk on the job at least 3 times and then you will be reprimanded, right? It's all these insane things that you would not believe. But again, it goes back to power and control and money, that if you can never fire a bad teacher, their money gets, basically taken out of the paychecks into the union coffers in perpetuity.
And they're indebted to the union for protecting them.
Well, correct. And whereas, you might, some of these school systems, especially there's private schools in this country where it's like they operate a whole school with like one administrator, one, deputy administrator, and then it's all classroom teachers, right? Yeah. You can actually operate these things pretty lean, but No. They want the staff bloat. They want as many teachers and as many, basically dues paying members beyond teachers to be part of their system. So hence, why fire anybody when it just means you can collect their dues in perpetuity and you can pay them not to teach, right? There's the famous rubber rooms that people know of in New York where it's like people are going to this, like basically it's a classroom full of teachers that they just can't fire and they're all sitting around, reading newspapers. I mean, legendary old stories like this, that it's like, that's the heart of the problem here. When you have a monopoly that controls the system, that is fueled by taxpayer funded professionals working within that system, why fire any of them, right? So it makes total sense when you're looking at that sinister view that these big schooling unions have of how they operate our school system. They just want money. That's all it's about. Follow
the money. It's a rule of thumb that you can apply to almost every industry, every political party, every effort. There's grift everywhere, folks, everywhere. Tommy Schultz, it's great to see you again. American Federation for Children. You can find them. We've been showing you the website, etc. Just check them out and see if you want to get involved in some way, shape, or form. Tommy, it's great.
And soon we'll have even more materials going out saying, here's how you sign up for school choice in your state. Again, we got more, 35 states essentially that have some form of a private school choice program. Even more have charter schools. But then once we pass this federal bill, all 50 states are on the line. So we're going to get a lot of people signed up, a lot of people engaged. Check us out at schoolchoicenow.org.
Schoolchoicenow.org. Schoolchoicenow.org, folks. Be brave, do good, check it out. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Tommy. Hey, you can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.